Before we get into it, if you enjoyed these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button, and keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that.
All right, folks, here we are on Thursday, July 17th. We're going to take a look at Lucid today. So, holy ravioli. I don't know if you believe me, but yesterday when I made the Neo video, I thought, oh, tomorrow would be a good day to catch up on Lucid. It's been a long time. And boy, do I wish I had flip-flopped those. So here we are after this giant news today on, was it Uber and Robo-Taxi and all that jazz, and ending up over 36%. I mean, you can see if we flip here quickly to the 10, we won't belabor this, but I mean, this motion on this news, this bump on a 10-minute candle, up over 45% in the pre-market, and settling in not terribly far away from that high. So I know percentage-wise it is, but on a day that moves like this, you know, it's honestly pretty impressive that it had that staying power throughout the day. Folks not just sort of incessantly and for some people tragically taking gains. And so, yeah, but I mean, it feels like it's a real news item. We'll see what comes of it in the coming days and weeks and whatnot. But I mean, this is, you know, a legitimate mover in my opinion. So I added some levels to the chart. Now, these levels we already had on the chart. Those I did not add in. And so those still feel very much in play to me. You see this 305, and today settles on that 305. You go back to look at my last Lucid video, which I think was in February of 2025. You'll find that level there. So that level coming back into play. Now, if it slips it, is it the end of the world? No, of course not. But a few things to be mindful of before we zoom out and look at some bigger picture stuff. Right around this 305, if it does come down, it obviously now has this huge gap, right? So the huge gap, it would get into it at about 282, and it wouldn't fill it until it got all the way down to about 234. So it could peel off a lot percentage-wise. And we have this level that also was, you know, on the chart back in the day, a few months back at 260, and that's sort of smack dabish in the middle, I guess is probably pretty close to the middle of that gap. So, you know, would that really do anything if it gets into this huge gap to stop it or slow it down? I don't know, but it's there. So I thought I would call that out. But this 305 is the nearest in level of significance. Now, if and when it starts to push again or continues to push, 335 is the first level where I'm going to say, yeah, it needs to show that it has some proof of buyers willing to step in significantly enough to secure that 335 level. You see, it tried to move through it. Every motion off of it today was a wick off of it, right? You had this huge candle, that 45% one that we talked about, that wicked off of it, and then it tried again at 9, wicked off, tried at 9:10, wicked off. This was a clear rejection, wicked off again at 11:40. So it kept wanting to press back in that direction, but every time, you know, the sellers, clearly there's just a wall of sellers there who are looking to lock in profit somewhere in the like 330 to 370 range, you know, somewhere in there. So we'll see what it takes to overcome those sellers. But you see, you know, even toward the end of the day, buying picking up here, and volume picking up overall. So if the volume can stay there, you know, it's going to need that volume to persist to outpace those sellers, because I would suspect, you know, the last time that it hit that level was, like I said, 11:40 in the morning. There's probably still folks that are at that price point to sell. So 330 to 370, I would just be aware. But guess what? If and when that wall breaks down of sellers, or once they're overcome, then we look further north. And further north, I have, now it's in red. I have 404, and I'll just tell you why it's in red. There might be a lot of selling pressure there. And so I just wanted to sort of mark it to be aware. You see this like flooring way back here in 2023, toward the end of the year in 2023. And then the motion toward it subsequent to that, a few months later in 2024, couldn't even really get a direct motion toward it. It did later in 2024, about a year ago. It was able to get motion to that 404 a couple of times, right? A couple of clear swings. And each time it just was not able to hold it. The buyers were just not willing to outpace the sellers, like just above or at that $4 mark. So huge psychological level there at 4. So just be aware. I have it at 404. And the way I think about these psychological levels isn't like there's not a magical thing at 4, but in some cases there seems to be an unwillingness to approach a key level. So that's where you might see something like a resistance level like 393 or something, right? Where it's like the approach even getting near to 4, buyers get a little shaky and sellers come in hot, and that's that. This is sort of the other side of that coin, which is like once it pushes through that key psychological level of 4, the question that remains to be answered is, are buyers willing to continue to buy the stock over $4 and outpace the sellers over $4? So that's why I have that one as red. I think that might be a really, really tough level for it to get through, but that doesn't mean that it can't. So if it does, beyond that, I clocked 487. These are percentage-wise really, really big distances apart. So keep that in mind. But I tried to pull out what I felt were some very clear, strong levels. I didn't mark every small level in between because I'm covering ground from like 222 up to 614, maybe even beyond. Yeah, and beyond. And so I didn't want it would just look like a disaster of a chart if I put levels for every one that I could find. So I tried to pull out the strongest ones. So 487 gets through there. At some point 614, and then I wanted to do something to get sort of close to 10, and here's the obvious thing. There's this gap from way back in 2023 and early in 2023 at that, and that gap would fill at 982. So the approach to 10 plus this gap being here plus this flooring being here made a lot of sense for me to just place it there. So those are the levels to the upside that I see now. To the downside, if it does sort of pull back, if profit locking seems to outpace momentum buying, like I said, 260, but you do ultimately have this big gap in here that you're going to have to contend with if and when it gets in there. Maybe additional catalysts will come in or something that will keep it sort of outpacing, even getting near that gap, or if it gets into there and there is, like I said, some good follow-through news, or maybe even a brand new catalyst that has some significance, maybe it can drag it out of there without getting sucked through the gap all the way, but we'll have to see. But that 231 that you see down here, that I had on the chart also from at least that February timeline that I talked about before when I had these levels in. And so that was green because I thought that was a good accumulation zone. And if you had been doing that and accumulating around 230 or even below, yeah, you probably are looking at a nice DCA profit today. So, so that's that. I don't think there's probably a ton on such a big move. Yeah, not a ton to look at with the EMAs, other than to just generally say it is now situated above the 183 EMA, so it may have some additional support if it comes down toward it. Again, however, would just the EMA being there sort of overtake the fact that it's in the gap and lift it out of the gap? I don't think so. But that the EMAs will come more into play when the price settles a little bit, because then it will start to interact with them to some degree. Now, on the think or swim side of things, holy guacamole, good call out by the TTM squeeze indicator. So you could look at it one of two ways. I would probably look at it the latter of what I'm about to describe, but you have this lengthy trigger and fire, and yeah, there was a little bit of a move up, but nothing outside of the channel, and then pressed all the way down to the downside of the channel. So yeah, you went full upside of the channel to full downside of the channel. Okay, to me that's not a tremendously outsized move unless it's a super boring stock. But then what happens is it consolidates further, re-trigger, refire, and on the re-trigger and the refire, bang, you get the motion. Now, is this like following through because of the chart setup? No, it's the news catalyst. But in convergence with that, or in confluence with that, we have the chart setup. So the chart setup was there, ripe for a big outsized move, and then the catalyst happened to come like within days. And so you have that confluence of events. Could that mean that there's a more significant move to take place than otherwise would have happened? Maybe. Now, even with that huge move today, here's the crazy piece of the puzzle. If you put any weight in these ATR levels, you have the call trigger sitting here at 259. You have the plus one ATR all the way up at 413. So it rejected, and I mean, again, this is when you can be skeptical of these ATR levels, but it rejected right off of this initial mid-range here today. So it's exactly where it wicked off of, where it pushed back, and sort of ended up settling in between. So, do we get more push? Do we get more motion? Can it overtake this and press 2 or even through that 413? We'll have to see, but that's another marker that, again, by not wanting to clutter the chart here, obviously that 413 would overtake the 404. You could, of course, have a motion like this, right? Both of these looked like they were bursting through, but they got drawn right back underneath that level. So don't let it fool you just because it breaks the level. Doesn't mean anything magical is going to happen. It can definitely get drawn back in. That's why I said these are like red alert, cautious level. But yeah, and if it stays relatively where it is, which it may not because it's obviously in a volatile position, and these levels are all dynamic, so they shift every time a candle gets put in, but for where the price is today, if it stays relatively the same or ends up relatively the same, the August call trigger would be up here around 360 or so, with a plus one ATR all the way up to 510. So we'll see. But that's where the levels are. But it was pretty crazy to see that TTM squeeze indicator was lining up really well with this news. And that plus one ATR level is still way off in the distance. So we'll see what, if anything, comes of it. But congrats to Lucid. We'll see what can come of it. Hopefully the news wasn't overhyped or overblown or overpromised. Or at least hope for the bulls that that's the case. But we'll find out as time ticks by. All right, folks. So I hope that your trading week has been going well. And as always, I appreciate you watching. And I will see you in the next video.